Presence of the United Nations Development Program technical team led by Mr. Nicholas Burunde, the coordinator for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. They are here. Please give them a warm welcome. I also like to recognize the presence of Ms. Olive Chigongo, President Chamber of Commerce of the Republic of Uganda. She falls in that category of persons called evergreen, whatever that means. The lady I'm inviting wears quite a number of hats, but for this morning, for purposes of time constraints, besides working in the top office of this republic and having served and continues to serve in the media, at least in their heart, passionate with children and passionate with this republic, I'd like, ladies and gentlemen, to invite Baroness Irene Birungi Mcha, the coordinator of the Presidential CEO Forum, to come and make her remarks. In my opinion, she's Baroness. I apologize if you think she isn't. Lady Irene, you're welcome.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm humbled, Samson, with those beautiful statements and introduction. I want to start off by appreciating the Honorable Minister of Trade who has made it this morning. I really want to say thank you so much. This event is equally important because of you. We are here to talk about the most important topic, and that is trade across Africa. So thank you so much for making the time. I also want to appreciate the presence of Honorable Henry Musasizi from Ministry of Finance. Thank you so much for making the time. I want to thank the chairman of the Presidential CEO Forum for having been in position to lead this platform so that it can be able to present the neutral stability of attracting the core captain of the industries of every sector in Uganda to come and have conversations that will take this country to another level. I want also to recognize the honorable members of parliament who are present here, but also want to recognize the most important partners, starting off with the President of the National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Madam Olive Chigongo. I know Samson had already recognized some of you, but it's important that I mention that. I want also to recognize the Chairman of UMA, Mr. Dale Kayemba, for having made it. We know you're having a very busy week, and the International Trade Fair ongoing, for you to make time this morning, we really appreciate. I also want to appreciate every person here. We have the Private Sector Foundation, Uganda. The entire board and the entire team are here. They play a key role in bringing together most of these private sector institutions. They also play a key role. They've been doing the readiness of how ready can we be in terms of preparing ourselves for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We look forward for those remarks from Mr. Stephen himself. I want to appreciate the fourth estate. That's where my heart is indeed, Samson. It's that estate that makes you happen, or that builds the integrity or the foundation of every communication that you need to make. I would also want to really recognize the head of government agencies here present. We have the Commissioner General from Uganda Revenue Authority. Thank you so much for making the time. We have the Secretary General from Uganda Investment Authority, the Director General, Director General, Uganda Investment Authority. We have the Executive Director from Uganda Development Corporation. I also want to recognize Uganda Export Promotion Board. I think I saw Mr. Eli Twineo somewhere. I also want to recognize Lily Ajarova from Uganda Tourism Board. Masik, I know we show the Bishop of the Day. Thank you so much from Uganda Services Bureau. Of course, Stephen Asimwe, the Executive Director of Private Sector Foundation Uganda. You're most welcome, and the entire team that is here. But more so the private sector that has brought us here today. I know we have the National Planning Authority, Mr. Mvaola, who will be taking us through a keynote address on how best we can leverage off the opportunities in Africa. But also, we have our friends. I just met someone called Thomas from Total, and he gave me a very nice motivation. He said he's been to more than 6 countries, but Uganda has the best business environment. Can we clap to that, please? So thank you so much, Thomas, for that beautiful comment this morning. I also want to recognize each and every person here, my friends, my colleague from State House, Charity Mwebesa, for making time. And I also want to recognize representative from UNOC, Madame Prescovia. Thank you so much. Earlier on, the chairman asked, where is the local content? And so she said you're the implementer. So we're looking forward to knowing more of that. So on behalf of everyone, today is a very historical day for us as the private sector. And why? Because this is the year when we're celebrating the 60th anniversary as Uganda. So we have come a long way. And it's always timely for every little platform that we get to be part of. I want to in particular appreciate the head of state who has been able to give the platform to each and every one of us here to serve this country, myself inclusive. I'm always humbled to be able in position to network and see myself add value to the country that I'm born in. Having said that it's a historical day, we are looking forward to learning more about what it takes to penetrate into the African continent, and more so, why is PCF? Presidential CEO Forum is a platform that was initiated by His Excellency himself, and I being humbled to be the coordinator and being in position to manage the core activities of the platform. The Secretariat has done a good job to mobilize each and every important person in this room today. His Excellency Wamekele confirmed, I think it was Monday morning, about 1 a.m. of Monday morning, that he will be making it to Uganda. And so we only worked in the 3 days to mobilize each and every one of you here. So we don't take it for granted. Thank you so much for making the time. As it is, our mandate is really to bring together the CEOs on different platforms and speak to key topics and themes that will make a difference to this country. We have conversations going on e-mobility, chaired by Paul Musasizi, who is the board member of Presidential CEO Forum, and he's not here today, but we have a representative, and we'll have a brief comment on that. We also have conversations going on climate change and sustainability with all the stakeholders. We had, in the last few months, conversations on innovative financing. This was chaired by Keith, the ED of Capital Markets Authority. I'm hoping that he's here. And it is important to know that for all these conversations, then we get to find solutions and how best we can charter our country forward. I want in a special way to recognize one of us. Earlier on I said he's the most unique dressed person in the room. I know Director Tom, you're humble, but please allow me to introduce you. Director Tom of CID, who is here to not investigate anyone, but to really rub shoulders with each and everyone here. Professor Kwesiga, you're most welcome. I'll not take long. I hope I have a few slides that I'll be able to speak to. most of all is the key objectives of what we are intending to As we get that sorted, I'll just go on with a few comments. As we know that we will be hosting His Excellency, the Secretary General, Mr. Wemekele Mene, who will be here shortly, and to take us through his keynote address in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We are really interested in knowing how best can we be in position to produce massively in the products that we are interested in, or the products that have already been zoned. Uganda, we are blessed that so much of the strategies have been put in place. We have key representatives from my financier director budget can testify to that we have zoned off a key products that we can start with so that we can penetrate that market. Opportunities for the private sector in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is very important to catalyze the production of goods and services with a mission to access to markets and also enhance our economic transformation. As His Excellency is always putting it, that we are ourselves the people that are supposed to push this country forward. He is an advocate of producing massively through the different initiatives that he has put in place. Of late, we have the PDM. One of my colleagues yesterday said, I really have no clue what PDM is all about, but I know it's going to work. And I know the PDM is, that is Parish Development Model, is an initiative by government to ensure that we have the small or the low-income earners also get into the money economy. And that is a prayer by His Excellency the President. So us as private sector players, what are we doing to ensure that we actually be the off-takers of the parish development model? Because with that taking off, it means we shall have production of maize increasing, we shall have production of simsim increasing, we shall have the cassava, we shall have the milk production, but we need the off-takers. And the off-takers is us, the private sector who are in this room, and the manufacturers who will be able to add value to these products. I really want to end on a short notice of just giving a quote. Maybe the slides will be shared later. I love the quote by Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker is a renowned business entrepreneur who believes in, as a CEO, you're supposed to add value to the last person in your team or to the person who is of the weakest link. And he goes by saying, the ultimate resource in economic development is people. It is the people, not capital or the raw material, that develop an economy. So it asks the people in this room that we are here intentional, we are here because we are supposed to play part in building the economy or the economies of our country in our different platforms. I thank you, and thank you so much for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, you should take Baroness Irene seriously when she says her heart is in the media. The honest truth is, it is there. If you know, you know. I grew up watching two very interesting shows on television back in the day. One was Inspector Derek, the other was Castor. What I learned from those two UTV shows is that whether it was Castor, who was a short old German man, the actor at least, they would put on sharp suits and come to visit people's houses. I eventually grew to realize that they were not visiting, they were doing their job. By the nature of those jobs, people don't lazily go visiting places. They are always working. Director Tom, I'm not talking about you. Good morning. It's good to see you around. It's just reckless, for instance, to believe that a journalist has come to visit you. Even when they say that it is off the cuff, that information is always going to be very beneficial. I work with journalists, so I know them. The profession of biblical theology has lent me to the media. I'm a media practitioner working with journalists. They are very good people, I have since learned. I'd like to take the opportunity to invite the executive director of the authority, yes, that plans for this country. He's a very interesting gentleman, especially when he is in the mood, which is more often than not. He is a royal, and I've been told by the people I work with that he wears his beard right. I don't know what that means, but female journalists have told me that he wears his beard right. Whether the male journalists are just jealous, I don't know. Mr. Mvawala, Dr. Mvawala, you're very welcome. And if you're lucky, you'll get a hand clap.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I thank you very much. This has been one introduction I never expected to have. I have been requested to discuss, and in my usual style, I'm not going to be able to give you slides because I have dressed for you to attend to me, and I hope you're attending to me now. Positioning Uganda's private sector for the African Continental Free Trade Area. The paper has been distributed. I hope you read the details. I am just going to give you punchlines that we think that we should reflect on. Number one, and most importantly, we note from the statistics that between 2016 and 2020, Uganda experienced positive trend in its export performance, regardless of the fact that we have been affected by COVID. And that is good news, that we are seeing the trend in exports grow. But we are also seeing our balance of trade with our neighbors become positive. And despite the vulnerabilities that we see in trade, Uganda's export performance within the African trade continent remained resilient. So we are very, very resilient. But at the same time, we don't see very much investment in trade. If you look at the numbers, we have a resilient trade, very resilient, with limited investment. That's another area that we need to look at as a country. The third, when you look at that table in the paper, table 1, it is presenting to you your earnings. And these earnings have been growing, but we know the culprits where these earnings come from. But most importantly, the value of export within the regional blocks of East Africa and COMESA has also been growing. Now, that is the good side. Despite this growth, what are we seeing? We are seeing that we are exporting mostly products with very less value, primary products. But at the same time, we are seeing a beginning of a change within our exports, the manufactured exports have begun to increase. It tells you that we are not doing that badly, we are doing well. So the critical issue today here, how do we support the private sector to add value to what we export? I think as a country, if we can solve that problem, we will be able to deal with very many issues that we have. And we have given you a table 2, which presents to you the earnings over the period up to 2020, where we can get information and you can look at it. But it's very clear from this information that we are not maximizing the benefits from our exports. So if you're a strategic person, it should be around how much do we get from our exports. And here now comes that our leaders on the continent have given us a gift through the AFTA. And numbers have been crunched, and a presentation is going to be made, which shows that participating in AFTA is going to have a very good effect on what we earn in our exports. But I hope that we all understand how AFTA works. And that will be presented. It's not my duty today. So, what opportunities does Uganda have? And I'm going to concentrate more on the analysis that we have tried to do to see what are those low-hanging fruits. And I would like to interest you in table 3 of that presentation, if you have it. Some analysis has been done, and we have been able to identify those areas where we are low-hanging. And the same culprits still come up. Coffee, and we are giving you a list of what can be done. But we are still showing a challenge that 95% of our coffee is exported as a raw material. We are giving you tea, which you already have. We have fish. We have dairy. I am being told that we will be sanctioned very soon with fish because we have not invested in the landing sites. Those are issues that we need to think about. If you are told what are the priorities of the next budget, not very many people will talk about the landing site. But it looks like it's becoming critical as far as fish is concerned. And it's something that we should be thinking about. We have sunflower, we have maize, we have beef. But my message today is not so much about this. My message today, that for us to benefit from AFTA, we should target the private sector mainly. We don't do that. It's not government that creates markets. Neither is it government that sustains these markets. The private people find these markets. So our strategy should be private sector driven, government enabled. For me, that is my message today, that we must target the private sector. And I'm going to demonstrate on how we should do it. Number one, because we know that we have challenges on the side of government. When you look at the strategic plan, one of the objectives is to turn our public service to support the private sector, not the other way around. And Joseph and my colleagues can tell you that this is still a challenge. For us to have the mind in government that private sector is working for us is still a challenge. Many times we say they are disturbing. Many times we say they are making profit. We make all those kinds of comments. How do we turn around the government machinery in government to ensure that the private sector We work for the private sector to make us survive. That is the area that we need to crack. I have presented to you what the private sector should do, but I am going to concentrate more on the challenges that are hampering our private sector from participating in the after. And I want to give you a very good example, standards. I don't know whether the ED of UNBS is here. Yeah, thank you. I think that's one of the most important people here present today. Standards, standards, standards. But I have a quarrel with her. There is no way UNBS should continue working like the director of police here. You can't continue arresting us on the roads when we have produced for you. You must change your ways. Come and work with us in the factories such that we produce what you want to be produced. There are no two ways about it. I find my capital, I go to China, and I'm giving a live example. I produce toilet paper. Nobody comes to check on me on the quality. They arrest my vehicle on the road. That's the problem. And I'm not attacking anybody. We can't continue having very high rates for people to test the goods that they are producing. This should become a public service, financed by my Honorable Minister of Finance. Standards. Iron and steel. We keep complaining the sizes. These guys are giving us sizes, they are not the right fit, they are whatever, they are brittle. Why is it that the same guys working with UNBS in a project where you followed them, they were able to produce steel that did the Nile Bridge? That's what we are calling for. We are calling for UNBS that is going to work with us and everybody who is in the private sector to walk us through the journey of a standard and deliver us to the market. It should not be how much money we collect in fines. That should be, and for me this is the most important thing. Now I come on my side, government. Joseph and all the colleagues who are here, plus our director here, sir. Information. We want the private sector to participate in these markets in Africa. What do we know about the markets in Africa ourselves? Should it be at the cost of the private sector to find this information, or should it be at the cost of government to find this information? SADC. What are the standards in SADC that these private people should produce? What goods can we take to SADC? What goods can we take to Ghana? And what standards? You know, I'm getting into the mood right now. And I want to ask questions to the private sector. Do you know these standards? By show of hands. That I know the standards of the SADC market. I can stop this presentation here, the rest does not matter. Critically, the government provide this service. Provide the resources to provide this service. Now, let me give you a very interesting topic. Well, you know that the structure of our economy has been changing, isn't it? And that services is the most important, isn't it? But do you know how much trade is of that service? The majority of that service is trade. How do we prioritize trade in this country? How much do we spend on trade in this country? Somebody asked me a question the other day. If they remove the planning authority, you think this country will not grow? I didn't want to use a ministry. I've used the institution I lead. But if they removed most of these ministries, would there be a problem in this country? Everybody has kept quiet. Possibly there would be no problem. Maybe. Because we are not doing our work the way we are supposed to do it. For me today, the message is, if we are going to go after, and it's not going to be the slogan of the century again, because we have had a lot of these slogans, we must change the way that we are going to work. Trade must come to the fore of our planning systems. We must improve numbers, information to these people. We must, as government agencies, provide the public service. We must, therefore now, Presidential CEO Forum, all our attention, and honorable ministers and PS, all our attention should be on the UNBS, in our view, to help these people, to prepare projects for the UNBS that are going to help them help people get these so-called barcodes, whatever. There are so many terminologies. If you start, you never stop. We must turn our ways and work for the people. There is a lot of things in this paper, but I have said the most important. And I am hoping that as we do this, we will move this country to the next trajectory. And I say all this for God and my country. You have the paper, you can read it, you can criticize it the way you want. I am used to these things, and I work better when I'm taken on. If anybody is prepared, I am here. May God bless you.
My father told me that you can get very far with confidence. Most of the time I say things and people think I'm joking, but one of the best ways to communicate is through humor. When I said that when he is in the mood, I was not joking. You can tell when he is in the mood, he gets going. If it is your idea of fun to take on a PhD graduate, then that's upon you. Dr. Mvawala is Dr. Mvawala. And when you are the Katikiro, I didn't want to bite my tongue into several versions by trying to pronounce Sogi. Honorable Sechitoreko, Sogi is the cool version of Lusoga. So for us, we call it Sogi. So I avoided to make an attempt on Sogi, and that's why I used the one that would serve my tongue. But give him a very big hand clap, albeit in absentia. I'd like to invite the Honorable Msasi, who understands more than the rest of us what has been said. But I've been reading from senior consultant Wikipedia here, and he is known as a Ugandan businessman, a certified public accountant, some say accountant, but my teacher insisted it is accountant. In the same way you'd say cotton, and shirts have buttons. He is definitely a member of the 11th Parliament who chaired a committee in the 10th. It is a fact that he is placed in the Ministry of Finance or Finance, depending on whether you attended nursery or kindergarten. But I'm cognizant of the fact that some were lucky to begin in primary one, since we're a country developing. Anywho or anyhow, Minister Msasizi, fresh from Chisoro on an investment tour of duty, is here. And when we were in Chisoro, he spoke glowingly of the hills there. Honorable, I'd like to invite you with humility, which is not very often when I'm involved. But I'd like to use humility to invite you to make a few remarks. And by few, I mean not many. The Honorable is not walking gingerly. It's the carpet that is soft.
Thank you, Mr. Kasumba. My senior colleague, Honorable Mwebesa from Ministry of Trade, distinguished CEOs, participants, ladies and gentlemen, Kasumba forgot to mention that I am also holding the portfolio of the Minister of Finance. I want to make one point. We are here as CEOs to generate ideas on how we can grow our economy, how we can leverage from the opportunities we have as Uganda, as a region, and as Africa. Dr. Muvawara has just said that in all of this, standards is a very critical issue. I went to Moscow in 2015. I found our coffee in Moscow in raw form. These coffee beans we pick from the gardens managed to access the world markets as they are. And here we are, well qualified, powerful people with a stable government, everything peaceful, and we are just proud to be CEOs in Uganda when this is happening. I want to challenge all of us, ladies and gentlemen, that there will be a time when we shall be asked where we were when things were happening in the wrong way. John is here, and Kagwa. From our side, our biggest concern is the narrow tax base and the narrow economy, which is unable to sustain our ever-growing expenditures. We can only close this gap when efforts are made around these discussions on how best and what we can do to grow our economy. The key driver of economic growth is trade and commerce. And I want to believe as CEOs
in your boardrooms where you sit on a daily basis, making various decisions on a number of things, I want to challenge you to always think about how you can contribute to your economic growth by promoting trade and by looking at ways how the rigidities within trade can be minimized to promote growth and henceforth growth of our economies. I thank you so much and thank you for the opportunity you have given me to speak to you.
Honorable Minister, thank you very much. Some things are better left to the persons who can say them better. And I think you did the last bit of the introduction better than I could have done. Thank you so much. We did hear you speak about the time when we shall be asked what we did as coffee beans were shipped from here to Moscow. I haven't been to Moscow, but I would like to request you that the next time you go there, please let me know. I'll not disappoint you and turn down your invitation. I can't be very good company, to be honest. Speaking of travel, when I was a little boy, I used to envy my father's traveling bag. I felt very envious because I could look at the bag and know that it has been to places I've never been. And that was very, very painful. And my father often said that don't worry. One day he shipped an entire choir from here to Gaborone in Botswana for gospel work, and then he would also ship or fly, if you may, his employees. And I would never understand why employees and other people are flown on his wallet and his children aren't. But he would say, you will fly on your own. And indeed, we have managed to fly. But what we must do is to make sure that when our coffee beans are either flying or being shipped, they are not in the condition in which they have come out of either Chisoro, Urubanda, or Mbale. I think we have come to the place where we can grind them. If the machines have failed, tufune binu, tusekule, tuteke mu paper bag. It's how you brand. They might beat us in the machines, but what we will say is, this is hand ground Ugandan coffee. And what I have found that if you brand right, the price changes. I've seen people saying that this suit is hand sewn and it fetches a different price. But even if it is machine sewn, there is still a hand on the machine. So if you got in the business and said this coffee, unlike all other coffee, is hand ground by mothers from Chisoro, and then you profile those mothers, a kilo could fetch 800 pounds. But because there's a certain group of people who'd like to brag about the fact that the coffee they are taking is not machine ground, but it is hand ground. There's a place where I was paid $3,000 for emceeing because I branded myself in saying that I am raised by nearly a single mother, and my talent is not like no other. So I was paid £3,000, but it was in a dream when I woke out. I wasn't any richer than I was before. I'll invite the chair, Uganda Manufacturers Association, to come and make a few remarks. Chair, you're very welcome. I've been looking for an introduction for you, and I will find it by the time you finish.
Thank you very much. Honorable ministers here present, honorable permanent secretaries, heads of government institutions, our partners, UNDP, all protocol observed. You know, it is said, Uganda, we have been lamenting, oh, Uganda, we are disadvantaged. We are landlocked. And it is very costly to do business in Uganda. Now, reality has caught up with us. We've been placed at the center of the market. Now let's hear you say that we are landlocked because we are in the center of the market. The entire African continent is around us. So we don't have any other excuses. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Deo Kayemba. I'm the managing director and proprietor of East African Roofing Systems Limited and another concrete company called Kadeco Concrete. I currently serve as the chairman of Uganda Manufacturers Association, a position that I'm very privileged to have, courtesy of my sister, Barbara Mrwana, who groomed me. For us, private sector, we come here, listen to you, but when we go back, we want to start business. We are not very interested in the talk. We want government to do their part, to facilitate us. Uganda Manufacturers Association has about 1,500 members. Out of the 1,500, about 500 of us are ready to trade and already trading in the region. What is our experience? We have taken learnings from our regional blocks to which we are members, that is the ESC and COMESA. What we have seen, that sovereign countries are very protective. You come here, discuss, and agree. Even the government seated here will go back and do other things. Why? Because their budget is not balancing. They have to put small duty here and there on a free trade area protocol they have signed and ratified in Parliament. They say, no, we are going to charge duty, the budget is not balancing. We are urging government, if you sign up and be ready and work. Because when you sign up, we start planning. We put investment on the ground. We buy machinery. We buy trucks. while discussing this, please know that at our level, behind there are men and women who are putting their life at stake to borrow, to seize the opportunity of the Africa Free Continental Area. We are not going to wait until everything is finished. We're already working. So please give us very serious consideration in doing this. And when we sign up, we are ready to start. What are we doing as Uganda Manufacturers Association? We noted, as Dr. Mvawala said, that there is not a lot of information flowing around about the Africa Free Continental Free Trade Areas. And we said, what should we do? We gathered our members, about 500 of them, and we approached our partner UNDP, and we thank you very much UNDP for that. They funded an educational program which has been very beneficial to our members. Now about 300, 400 members understand what it is to trade on Africa Free Trade Area platform. We are waiting for a few things from government. And these things are, some of them have been talked about by the previous speakers. Harmonization of standards, I don't want to repeat it, but it's very critical because you cannot export what is not acceptable in the other countries. So we need to move very fast on the harmonization of standards so that we are all at the same level. Number two, the rules of origin. The other day, one of my members was trying to export, and we noted that we don't yet have ratified rules of origin. So where am I going to get the certificate of origin if we don't have the rules of origin? My brother John, I think you understand how rules of origin can save a day. So we need to be clear about the rules of origin. Please move faster and get them done. Number four is communication infrastructure. You are talking here, but calling Burkina Faso is as expensive as calling Russia. Why should it be? Why should I go through an exchange somewhere to call my brother in Burkina Faso? Why don't we agree on a uniform rate? Because business is about communication. We need to agree on basic standards to move faster. Then, tariff offers. You know, the way it works, that your country gives tariff offers, the items you are ready to start trading. For example, if you are going to trade with Namibia, you give them a what? A tariff offer. And in a reciprocal manner, they give you the tariff offer on the items you are going to start. This area has not moved fast enough, and we need to know which items we are starting with, because we cannot open up, and we understand, we cannot just open up all at once and say everything is zero. No. We need to agree, my minister, Honorable Mwebesa, I think we need to move in this area and give the tariff offers to the countries that we expect to start trading with, so that we can now start. Last but not least is the transport infrastructure. That is a big monster.
let it be road, let it be rail, let it be air. It is still a big monster that is going to prevent us from trading with each other. And if we don't address this monster, it's going to, we are wasting time here. We are really wasting time. Because most of the countries we are trading with have ports, and they will get imports from wherever they get them cheaper than us. Why should they buy from us? I urge you, the countries that are African countries, to come together and make one infrastructure bond for a rail line from Durban to Casablanca and from Djibouti to Nigeria or wherever. That is what is going to solve our problem. If we cannot make the rail, we can start with interconnecting roads. At least each country can do their own so that we can trade with each other. Thank you very much. I don't want to waste a lot of your time, but I'm here to give you assurance that the private sector, the manufacturers are ready to add value to our critical outputs, and those ones that where we have competitive advantage and sell to the Africa continent. Thank you very much.
It would be a contradiction for an investor the size of your investment to be wasting time. There's no way you can have such a size of investment if you are wasting time or a time waster. So even if you spoke for another 5 hours, those of us who have failed to manage kiosks would still listen and go home and said, I had words of wisdom from a man who is humble in very many things apart from bank balance. I have a lot of humility in my bank account, but that's where humility starts and stops. I'd like to invite Lady Olive Chigongo. In many ways, she is the Duchess of the Chamber of Commerce-shire. When I was in the UK, they had their counties are shires. We will. She's a key partner with us, Lady Olive Chigongo. Please come and share a few remarks. When my wife is struggling with what to wear, I Google pictures of this elegant lady and say, try this.
Thank you. Good morning. The Honorable Ministers, Permanent Secretaries, CEOs of the different MDAs and private sector. I wasn't supposed to speak, but coming from private sector and this being a function, so I'll say a few words. And it won't be repetition of what has been said before, both by the Chairman of UMA, the Honorable Minister of Finance, that private sector, we should be leading. And leading now to the whole continent. But we need government support Today, Honorable Minister, I'm glad in the House, Honorable Minister of Trade, Industry and the PS, we are here preparing ourselves to open up to the continent. Thanks to NDP, once again, that have been enabled us to make contacts and talk about how we can do it, but I still have a lot to go. But as Uganda, Honorable Minister of Trade, it's unfortunate that he's out of the room. In Uganda, we still don't have a policy about the African free trade area. We don't have. So I think somebody mentioned that we don't have information that is not flowing. I think the reason is because we do not know as yet as to what is required, as what is needed about getting into free trade area. I think this is what we're discussing this morning. As you might have read in the papers, some countries in the region, for example, have already been picked to start trading under the tariffs of the free continental area. Kenya has been, I think Tanzania, Rwanda. There are about 7 countries. If I don't have them off head. They are already been given or allowed to trade. They have to fulfill the obligations or the requirements of the free continental trade area. So in Uganda, where are we? So Honorable Sasizi, Honorable Mwebesa and your PSs, please guide us on how we are going to trade within African continent. Having said that, another thing I wanted to emphasize, not repeating, is something to do with quality assurance. In all honesty, like Dr. Mubara said, as Ugandan manufacturers, we are harassed. We are harassed. Yeah, so I think I might have to stop there. The Honorable Representative is coming in, but to give another opportunity, I'll speak to you. Thank you very much.
A friend of the media, Auntie Nabi, is here. Good morning. The Secretary General is also here. Ladies and gentlemen, make them feel at Uganda. We shall remain standing for the 3 stanzas of our national prayer, also known as the anthem.
Our future in thy hands, united, fearfully, but it together will always stand. For Uganda, the land of freedom, our love and labor we give, and when neighbors all other countries call in peace and friendship will live. Oh, Uganda, the land that feeds us by sun and fat our souls grown. But our own dear land, we shall always stand the pall of our free cause crown.
Take your seats. We will stand up for the East African anthem.
Africa Mashariki.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the MC of the morning, I would like to apologize for the protocol gaffe. I received 4 protocol briefings from different protocol people, and I was sure that I had the best one of all those versions. Nonetheless, I apologize, and I will be comforted by the idea that my apology has been accepted. The Right Honorable Prime Minister Robina Nabanja, a friend of the media that we have since named Auntie Nabi, we thank you so much for making time for us. I will, at this point, whereas it is true that we had gone our way into the program, I would like to invite back very, very briefly the coordinator of the Presidential CEO Forum, very briefly, as the lead hostess it should be, Baroness Irene, to return for very obvious reasons. Baroness Irene, you're welcome.
Distinguished guests, Right Honorable Prime Minister, you're most welcome. His Excellency, the Secretary General, we are more than glad to have you here this morning. This hall may seem so small, but we have all the big hearts waiting to listen to you this morning. The ministers present, Minister of Trade, who we earlier said he's the most important person in this room, because we're going to be talking about trade. And without further ado, my name is Irene Birungi Mugisha. I'm so glad that you all made it this morning, and we are looking forward to sharing and learning, but more so to understand how best can Uganda promote ourselves across the borders. Allow me to also recognize my board that my chairman will be able to recognize later, but I appreciate that they are here. The head of state has been so significant and intentional in promoting a private sector-led economy. And it's for that reason that every single person in this room is very, very important. Right Honorable Prime Minister, as head of government business, I know you're very, very busy, but we are so happy to have you in this room. And we look forward to the remaining 1 hour or so that you listen through all the key presentations and also give us your remarks. I beg to conclude on this note. You're most welcome. Please feel free and enjoy the rest of the remaining few minutes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you we will finish on time, because I just received the lunch hour news for 1 o'clock, and I will read it at 1 in a studio not too far from here. I'd like to invite the chair of the Presidential CEO Forum, Lady Barbara Murwana, who is already 3/4 here to speak. She is passionate about today's speech.
Actually, I wanted to cut him short because I know he would have gone on and on and on. Your Excellency, the Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, Your Excellency Wamkela, welcome to Uganda. Your Excellency, the Prime Minister and the leader of government business in Uganda, thank you for taking time. Thank you so much. Honorable members of government, There's so many here. We thank you because, as the previous speaker has said, private sector needs your support. So the fact that I'm seeing so many of you here, whether it is the Minister of Finance, because now I think you're representing the Minister of Finance, and we have Honorable Mr. Kagwa, we have so many people here. I thank you so much for taking time to come to this meeting. I have a speech here, and I'm terrible at speeches because I can never read them. But here's the thing. Many, many years ago, this continent was one. There were no borders. We traded with each other because we needed to and because it made sense. We talked to each other in languages that we all understood. But somehow they were different, but we understood how to talk to each other. The question is, how do we get to that point? How do we get to a point when this continent of 1.4 billion is a continent where we don't see people on screens with children who can't even take flies out of their eyes? We're opening up and taking advantage of the many resources that this continent has in the ground, whether it's gold or oil or diamonds, to the ground, whether it's coffee or tea or rice, where we're taking advantage of this to a level that would make this continent rich. I think to go by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area's vision of taking 30 million Africans out of poverty, how do we achieve that? We achieve that by the people who are in this room, the private sector and the government sector. We ask all governments on this continent to make it easier for the private sector to do business. We ask the government, and I think this is now where I think I have to refer to my notes, Your Excellency. First, let's boast about our country, Uganda. I think Uganda was one of the first countries, and I think the 9th country to sign up on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We were 9th. We can clap for ourselves. And then I think we also have to commend the Africa Continental Free Trade that they were doing all this in 2019 during the COVID pandemic. And in these 2 years, I think you've signed up about 54 people out of 54 countries out of 55. That's also very commendable. So we thank you for being able to rectify that and making sure that you've got all these countries on board. So we thank you for that. Then we come to the ask. Now that you've achieved that, what then do we take? Where are the next steps that we need to take in order to unleash the people, the countries, the businesses, and the opportunities that they are in this continent? We need to have, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of seeing my fellow Africans dying on the Mediterranean Sea, going to countries when there's wealth on our continent. But it's just that we need to make sure that there are opportunities for the millions and millions of Africans to stay on this continent of opportunities. And I think a lot of things have been said prior to your arrival here. When we talk about Africa Continental Free Trade Area, let's make it free. Let's make it open. Let us avoid those non-tariff barriers. Let's avoid, my chairman was talking about this, when I say chairman, most of the people in this room are all chairmen. So you'll hear a lot of chairmen. So everybody's a chairman. But the chairman of the Ugandan Manufacturers Association made it so clear. And he says that let us not, if we have the vision, and we've all signed up for this Continental Free Trade Area, then let's operationalize it. And what does it mean? And we talked about the fact that if it's standard, let's make these things open and clear to all our business people to make sure that they can understand them. And let's not put, like I said, tariff barriers that will hinder us. Remember, I said millions and millions of years, we didn't have these borders, but we traded, and this continent thrived. So how do we get to that, but improve on it with everything that we have learned? So, Your Excellency, we have three little asks. I have three little asks. The first, like I said, is communication, and it is information. You have come to the PCF, which is the Presidential CEO Forum. We'd like to encourage the Africa Continental Free Trade Secretariat to work closely with us to enable us to link you through all our various associations in this country to the private sectors, to the people who then need to do the business in Africa. We'd like to help you, would like you to help us, to link us to like-minded people in the continent, because you have that database, you have that linkages, because we know the businesses that, and we have looked at all these businesses that we feel that as Uganda we can take advantage of, but we need you to help us to unleash that. So we'd like to have more linkages. As my chairman was talking about, and we also need to have clear rules of origin. There's a whole list of things, and I think I'll let my chairman to have a meeting with you sometimes just to talk about them, but it's very clear. But I think to me, it's really about getting us back to where we are with the tools that we've now learned and we now have to unleash this continent and make the people stick and be productive. I thank you so much, and I welcome you to Uganda. Before I leave, I'd like to introduce you to my board. This is a board who, actually we don't pay them, but they bring a lot of, they bring a lot to our board because they're scientists and they're artists, they're bankers, they're all sorts of people. So I'm going to have my coordinator please come and introduce them to this delegation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Quickly, I'll just take 1 minute. I'd kindly want to start with the senior, Professor Kwesiga. Please stand up for recognition. Professor runs Uganda Industrial Research Institute here in Uganda. I also want to go on to invite Mr. Matthias Katamba, who is the Managing Director of DFCU Bank. Ms. Ruth B. Nzika, she's Head of Skills Development Facility at Private Sectors Foundation Uganda. We have our former speaker, the Executive Director of National Planning Authority, Dr. Joseph Muvawala. We also have Brenda Tibamwenda, who is our board member here present. The other board members are not here, but we have the permanent secretary to the Treasury, Dr. Ngobi, who I think is represented probably by the Director of Finance, and also Dr. Musasizi of Kira Motors, who has a representative here and will take us through a 2-minute presentation on automobile. And also we have myself as the coordinator and all the other persons that always join us as the head of departments. That is it. Thank you.
World over, a traffic stop ranges between 45 seconds to about 120 seconds. But when you are at a traffic stop, it feels like it is a lot of time. More so if you have a flight, it feels like an eternity. And I work in the business of selling time. If somebody runs a story on your organization for a minute, the damage that can be done in that minute is a long, long, long time. And if you go to the United States on Super Bowl night, a second, to advertise a second on television prime time could be millions of dollars. So 2 minutes before CEOs speaking is a whole lot of time to pitch. And the following persons will have 2 minutes. It's not my decision. It is a directive from a place I will not mention. So you'll have an entire 2 minutes to pitch. And the persons that I'm mentioning include Mr. Stephen Asimwe from the Private Sector Foundation in Uganda. He will take a seat. It will actually feel like a flight to Kigali. The preparation for the flight is a lot longer than the flight, so it might take you longer to get to the platform than the time you will speak, but it's still worth it. He's from the Private Sector Foundation in Uganda. Mr. Mahmoud Huda, Agribusiness, he will be speaking also for 2 minutes. Mr. Ajapal Sipla, he will be talking about pharmaceuticals. He will also have 2 minutes. And lastly, but by no means least, Mr. Shaban Senyange from Chira Motors will also be speaking for 2 minutes. Dr. Muvawala took his 2 minutes a little earlier, but for aesthetics, he will still sit in his seat for 2 minutes. As the others have their 2 minutes, he will speak and make the concluding remarks in 1 minute and 3 seconds. Dr. Mvala, please take your seat. So we want to see, beginning now, whose problem with instructions persists. I'll begin with Mr. Stephen Asimwe for 2 minutes. There is no timer. Everybody has a wristwatch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasumba, Right Honorable Prime Minister, Ministers, and all protocol observed, my chair, Honorable Victoria Sekitoleko, and my board. I have a big document, but I have only 120 seconds, so I'll just quickly talk about, I'll just avoid the background, but just quickly, PSFU represents 12 sectors of the private sector, over 310 business associations. So we pretty much cover the private sector. And I'll quickly just go and talk about our experience. In the last 7 months, we have been to Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, and DRC. That's our first point of engagement. I'll not talk about the other countries. The biggest challenge we are facing as ACFTA and all the background that has been provided is, number one, the need for us to fix infrastructure. Our biggest neighbor, the DRC, where we visited a couple of months ago, has just joined the East African community. They have a population of about 100 million people. We did a visit to Kinshasa, Goma, and other cities, and we took a real study of the supermarkets and the markets. This is what we found. We found water from Italy. We have over 20 companies manufacturing water. We found hundreds and thousands of tins of Nido, which is a Nestle product from Switzerland. We have Lato milk in Uganda. And water from Italy, gizzards from Turkey, chicken from Brazil, tons and tons of beef from Argentina. And we investigated why. We found that the cost of flying beef from my village in Rwampara through Entebbe to Kinshasa, the cost of flying that is over $10 or $15. What do we need? We need urgent intervention in the area of transport. Please capitalize Uganda Air Cargo so that we push the cost of flying some of our products to that place quicker. Two, we need to support especially our neighboring countries in the area of infrastructure. Congo shares with us a border of about 950 kilometers. We have been trading, like Barbara said, for hundreds of years with Congo. We are brothers and sisters, tribes on both sides of the country. We need to fix that infrastructure because Goma, which is pretty much the largest city closest to Uganda, has 5 flights a day to Kinshasa. It takes about 2 hours or less thereabout to fly from Entebbe to Kinshasa. And if we fix that line from Bunagana to Goma of about 90 kilometers, and government has started on that, that would absolutely give us a fantastic opportunity to Bukavu, to Goma, and outlying areas. So we need to fix infrastructure between our countries. 3, it costed us about $50,000 to get market research across that country of DRC. And yet, it was our view that if government could, from time of the next budget, fix trade development officers in the ministries of foreign affairs, it would certainly help us to increase information, market research, market intelligence. So that's one of the things that we need to fix on that side of things. 4thly, we found that it's necessary that we stop working in silos so that we ensure that both government and private sector can tap into the necessity of synergizing and fixing that, that necessary capacity to be able to move things. 5thly and lastly, again, in the context of ACFTA, especially for our neighbors, is the need to ensure that we fast track peace and security. In 2013, South Sudan had emerged as our largest trading partner, and we were doing about $1 billion a year. That incident of the 2013, when the peace and security failed, we've dropped close to $300 million in business. Let's fix security in the African region, fix infrastructure, work in consonant, but lastly and most importantly, I have many points, is the need for export credit, export finance, insurance guarantees to ensure that we can help facilitate the movements. I had so much, but for now, the 2 minutes, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay. 2 minutes indeed. Thank you. Mr. Mahmoud Huda, you're next.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Right Honorable Prime Minister, Ministers, Secretary Generals, and champions of industry. I have some slides. Okay. So if we can go on the next slide, please. Africa Free Trade Agreement, what is it? It's exactly what it sounds like, but it's got about 3 or 4 distinctions from other free trade agreements. The first one is it's going to cover the goods, trade, services, investments, but also the intellectual property and competition policy. These last 2 or 3 areas are the big ask, because it's going to make us change the way we do business. And hopefully it will then create the way, as Barbara says, the ability to talk to each other. And that's the key behind the whole thing. So that we drop the trade barriers and the TBTs, and we start to enter markets. The next slide. No, go up. Go up. Okay. So the next slide here is globalization versus nationalism. Can you just go one? Yeah, right there. Okay. So the whole entire world today is going through extremely many challenges. We saw in Italy last month that we had a populist government come in, and the populist government was very anti-globalization. We have had the Brexit from the United Kingdom and the EU, again, very nationalistic. We've had Donald Trump in the last 4 years, America first, America first, America first. We've had Le Pen and Macron battle it out in the last 6 months, and Le Pen gaining ground from a right side of the government. So the question is globalization dead, or is populism alive? And in my opinion, the issue is we, as people that support globalization, is that we're evolving. And in this new evolution, we've got to take really cognizant changes of the key mistakes made in the last decade. Major one is inclusion. The gap between the rich and the poor has widened so much in the period of globalization that the question is can the poor catch up? Is there the ability to say, I'm going to send my children to school and they will have a future to enter these value chains? This is the key. Will we have the tools to make sure that next generation and the generation after that have the ability to enter the value chain? In 2017, 2018, in the World Economic Forum, Xi Jinping and Christine Lagarde met in Hong Kong. And they said the biggest threats to globalization is going to be, for developing countries, is going to be debt. Okay? The greater amount of debt that we take on in order to become part of globalization. So what do we need to do? We need to put in infrastructure. We need to make sure that policies, procedures, linkages, standards are all put in before we can enter the global value chain, which is investment, investment, investment. Whether human resources, whether digitization, or whether physical hard infrastructure. Now that goes against debt. And the key question with that is, all right, John up here needs to collect revenue, and globalization in the beginning tends to lose jobs. But at the end of the day, it tends to give you a return. So it's a long run issue. The next slide. Again, this just reiterates my last one. Next one. Okay.
In 30 seconds.
Go to the next one. These are just figures on the economy. And here, what I wanted to actually show you, if you go down, one more. Okay, so this is the July drivers of exports. Okay, and in these July drivers of exports, what we do see is that Sim and maize are the major drivers for the July figures for exports. But our major trading partner is the East African community. So we've taken that one step into globalization, and now we have to go 2 steps in. Next slide. His Excellency commissioned in February a committee called the President's Advisory Council on Exports and Industrial Development. They came up with these 4 pillars, which I'll just allow you to read. And the key in this council was to try to see how do we enter the value chain and how do we create coordination amongst the private sector and the public sector. Because the key word that Asimwe was saying is coordination. Next.
Mr. Mahmoud, I'm under pressure from a certain circle that I won't mention.
Okay.
But I'll give you 8 seconds to wind up.
Go down. So these are the targets that we've set for ourselves. Go down with the various products. We want to increase our exports by 6 billion. This one here talks about the standards, and keep going down.
How far down?
Go to the dangers. It's called What Are the Dangers? Go down.
I'm sorry, we've run out of time.
Okay.
Yes. I'm very sorry, but I'm pressed. some of our top guests here have an appointment in an address that never waits. So I want them to be part of this. So let's have the next speaker. Hopefully this time 2 minutes will be after 59 seconds.
Right Honorable Prime Minister, His Excellency the Secretary General of AFTA, I welcome you. I also had a presentation, but I think the time will not allow, and I request if you can visit our business to see what we do. I'm here to talk about pharmaceutical industry at large, and it's a complex industry where each part of value chain is in an industry itself. So in the pharmaceuticals, if you are a producer of raw material, it's an industry in itself, and there are countries which is solely dependent to just create one part of the value chain. In terms of the industry in Uganda, we have 43 manufacturers registered as per our local regulators' publications. They're small to large manufacturers of pharmaceutical products. I'll give a brief about the company I represent, Cipla Quality Chemical Industries Limited. It's a manufacturer and the largest manufacturer of HIV and malaria treatment in the region. And it's very few companies which are WHO pre-qualified in terms of the product we sell. Last year, the export for pharmaceutical sector from Uganda to the neighboring countries were around $28 million. So it's just a brief about the industry. With AFTA, I do think it will be a great opportunity for many of the pharmaceutical companies in Uganda who are busy expanding their capacities to leverage access to the market. But there are four main asks which the industry, we keep on looking. One is the structured market. The market of pharmaceutical is very fragmented in the continent, and if there is some structure could be provided, investment and return on investment could be a lot more easier. So that's the first ask. I think the second big area where the industry keeps on focusing and find it difficult to get is access to credit. Finance, pharmaceutical industry has always had some inherent risks because of change in drugs and the requirements and new diseases. So access to funding is, if it could be extended through the mechanism, it's going to be great as well. I think the third is access to technology and IP, which remains a big challenge for African manufacturers. We do have partners, but we think if it could be opened up and there's a pool where we can access technology as well as IP, and that further boosts the manufacturing industry in continent as well as trade. And I think the fifth one is regulations. I mean, I'll give you an example of the company I represent, that we have a local regulator which we need to comply to, we have a regional regulator which we need to comply to, we have an international regulator which we need to comply to, and probably going to get a continental regulator which we need to comply to. And these sometimes creates and slows the process down. And I know there is a progress and there are a lot of initiatives which we see, but the access to those initiatives, information, I think play a vital role, how we can extend and improve the industry at large. I close here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Big hand clap to that. Now, Shaban, you and I worked in urban television and you know time more than anybody else. So I give you a minute 30 seconds. If you can't pitch in that, then your boss had the wrong one.
No pressure. Your Excellency, Secretary General, the Right Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Members of Government, CEOs, good morning. My name is Shaban Sanyange. I'm the Senior Environment and Sustainability Officer for Kira Motors Corporation, and standing in for our CEO, who is currently at work in the south of France, but he does send his warm regards, and he hopes that we have deliberate, fruitful discussions today. Before we get started, if you could go to slide 4, please. Thank you. Before we get started, I just wanted to pose a question of food for thought, if you may. Now, if you're asked to paint a picture of what the future of sustainable mobility in Uganda or in the continent looks like, what would that picture look like? So I'd like to invite us all to just take a few seconds to imagine what that picture looks like, and if someone is brave to share what that picture looks like, I'm more than happy to engage. But I came across a quote from Professor Hans Peter, who is renowned for his work in quantum physics and creativity, and he says, instead of always evolving the automobile, we should be looking at how we design mobility differently in the future. And that is at the heart of what we do at Kira Motors, building a better Uganda through automotive technology. Now, there's so many discussions that are happening around sustainable mobility and climate change and environment sustainability as a whole, and creating opportunities at that front. And Kira Motors is a state enterprise that was established to champion value addition in the motor vehicle industry in Uganda through technology transfer, contract manufacturing, supply chain localization. But this is going to take a viable and robust automotive ecosystem to be able to thrive. And I think this does a great job at sort of showing what some of the opportunities are. If you could go down to...
Is that finally?
Yes, the final slide.
Okay.
Sorry, just 2 slides up. Up. Thank you. This is one of our products, which is the Kayola EVS, full electric low bus that was designed for urban mass transportation. It is premised to facilitate the total sustainable mass mobility solution in Africa, and we have 11 buses currently on the road. 5 of them are with Tondeka, providing mobility for the citizens. If you're able to catch one on the Nambo Lebusega route, operates all day, every day. So if you haven't yet had an experience to jump into the electric bus, we can engage. But I just wanted to end on a quote that says, people need to know that in our cities, fewer automobiles mean more quality of life, not less. And as we think about the future is bright, it is green, it is young, and it is now. Thank you.
Give him a warm hand clap when your CEO entrusts you with his seat. Young man, you're going places. Mr. Mvawala, in 40 seconds, and I would like to let you know that when the Prime Minister arrived, her back was at the back of her seat. She's now on the edge of her seat.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Prime Minister. Your Excellency, the Secretary General, after Secretariat, Honourable Ministers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I think the most important thing that we should look at, trade gives us an opportunity to extend our frontier. We can extend our frontier curve for this country using trade, and it can give us an uptake of what we produce, and therefore we need to prioritize it. But listening to the presentations, I think we do not have a problem with the number of institutions that provide trade. We have enough of those. We shouldn't create more. We should now move towards coordinating the activities of these institutions and ensure that we are moving in one direction under the leadership of the Ministry of Trade. We need that policy that people have been talking about. We need information, and we need to move now. Otherwise, it will be a slogan. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doc. And at this point, I'd like to ask you to join all of us in welcoming the Honourable Minister for the Docket of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives, Honourable Francis Mwebesa, who is going to speak to us right about now. The rest of you can make leave.
Right Honourable Prime Minister, my colleague Minister of Finance, the Secretary General of African Continental Free Trade Area, His Excellency Wamakele Mene and your delegation, the members of the private sector who are here, distinguished participants, the media fraternity. I warmly welcome you to Uganda and this inaugural private sector CEO forum on the African Continental Free Trade Area. I also congratulate the Board of Management of the private sector CEO forum for organizing this event at such an opportune time. As you are aware, Uganda is a key champion of African integration and the African Free Trade Area is one of the pillars of African integration. You will recall that my ministry played a key role in the conclusion of the negotiations process to establish African Continental Free Trade Area, chairing the platinum phase of the negotiation under phase 1, and continues to lead the negotiations process as well as the process to implement the agreement, just as is the case with other trade agreements. The ministry chairs the Cabinet Subcommittee on African Continental Free Trade Area and leads the interagency negotiations process that involves government, private sector, civil society, and the academia. We are currently advanced stages of developing a national strategy for the implementation of the agreement, thanks to the support provided by UNDP. Currently, the African market is the country's major export destination, accounting 66.5% of the country's total merchandise exports in 2021-2022, with goods worth 2.568 million exported to the African continent. However, of these exports to the African continent, 95.2 were exported to the East African community and the common market for the Eastern and Southern African COMESA, implying that 4.8 was exported to the rest of the African continent. The African Continent Free Trade Area is built on the strength existing of regional economic communities such as East African Community, COMESA, ECOWAS, etc., as building blocks, and we therefore look forward to the African Continental Free Trade Area enabling us to export more beyond the already existing trading blocks that we are members. The African Continental Free Trade Area promises virtuous circle of greater market opportunities, triggering more trade and investment, and allowing greater value addition. Industrial development, productivity growth, leading to decent job creation and inclusive growth, and thus faster development of the African continent. The Continental Free Trade Area provides us with access to a market of 1.2 billion consumers, projected to grow at 2.5 billion by 2050. 2. Purchasing power worth 6.7 trillion as at 2019. 3. Average annual impact bill of US dollars 547 annually. All these are potential catalysts for Africa's industrial development and increased agricultural production. I therefore implore all of you gathered here as CEOs of the private sector to take a deliberate steps to seize these opportunities. I assure you that government will do all its part as well. At this point, I wish to emphasize that for the full potential benefits of the African Continental Free Trade to accrue to African countries and citizens, numerous additional policy enablers must be put in place. While the African Continental Free Trade is largely dealing with regulatory integration by addressing aspects such as tariff liberalization, rules of origin harmonization, liberalization of services trade sector, trade facilitation and other aspects, it is fundamentally important that also pay dedicated attention to physical and social integration. This means that we must also focus on interconnecting infrastructure such as roads, railways, airports and airspace, waterways and seaports, digital infrastructure, and real regulatory interventions. These in themselves are investment opportunities, and it is ideal such opportunities are cited by ourselves as the African private sector. Your Excellency, I thank you for your accepting the invitation to come and give a keynote speech to the 28th Uganda International Trade Fair organized by Uganda's Manufacturers Association. I'm also glad that we flagged off the unusual consignment export under the African Continental Free Trade Area as a way of popularizing and driving support for the continental market. I therefore urge the private sector to keep the momentum going forward. Let me conclude by reiterating that Uganda remains committed to full integration of the African continent. Thank you for listening to me. I wish you a pleasant stay in Uganda. For God and my country.
Give the Minister another big hand clap, ladies and gentlemen. This morning we have the privilege of having a very distinguished keynote speaker who has seen as many blackboards as there is to see and graduated from black to green boards. That means changing continents for education. And they've also done whiteboards and markers and laptops plenty. From what I do know now, they have studied law at several levels, political science, and as well diplomacy. But looking at the keynote speaker, you can easily tell that they also have an interest in fashion. Whether they studied it or not is another matter, but their interest in fashion can certainly not be concealed. I won't say too much, but ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome the keynote speaker, and it is my view that they will only speak after a thunderous applause. And from what I understand, their Ugandan version of the name is Wamkele Mene, but South Africans have their own pronunciations of their name. There is even a middle name that could have taken my life if I attempted it. So, Mr. Keynote Speaker, with humility, I'll ask you, for the sake of this function, to give me the right pronunciation of all your three names before you begin.
Thank you very much, Program Director, the Right Honorable Prime Minister, the Minister of Trade, Industry and Investment, the Minister of Finance, and of course our host, the Chairperson of the Presidential CEOs Forum. It really is a pleasure to be here with you today. My name is quite easy to pronounce. Wamkele Mene. I did grow up with someone whose name is equally easy to pronounce, and his name is Kokoile Makolile. I had intended to follow the lead of the chairperson and not read my statement, because I have been provoked by the segment before, the thoughts, the challenges that were put across. If I may just respond first by congratulating Uganda. 57% of all your exports to the East African community. That means that you already are competitive regionally in terms of your export capacity.
It also means that you should see the African Continental Free Trade Area as an opportunity, as the Right Honorable Minister was saying. I live in Ghana. The milk that is on the shelves comes from another part of the world, and yet there's milk here. You go to a restaurant, the restaurant proudly writes, "Our prime beef is imported from Australia." Yet there's beef in Botswana. So we have a very big challenge of first changing the mindset about our productive capacity, our consumption patterns as a continent. The two leading countries that export cocoa in the world, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, probably close to 75% of the global market of cocoa comes from these two countries. And the heads of states of these two countries have recently directed that there will be no more export of unprocessed cocoa from these two countries to the rest of the world. You go to South Africa, you will see Belgian chocolate. And yet, the quality of chocolate produced by Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire is the same or even better as Lind or Belgian chocolate or any other chocolate. So we have a significant challenge to change the mindset and the patterns of trade. We will not succeed to implement the AfCFTA if we leave behind very, very important segments of society. So the point that was made by one of the CEOs on inclusivity is a critical point. We know that over the last 20, 30 years, trade agreements, globalization have benefited the elite and have benefited very, very few and left millions and millions behind. We also know, as was said in the slide, that there was somebody in the US who said globalization doesn't work. Trade agreements export jobs from the US and export these jobs to Mexico, and that we are, as a country, as the United States, we should reject globalization, we should reject free trade agreements. A very, very, of course, unsophisticated analysis, but nonetheless, as unsophisticated as that analysis was, we all know that it had electoral appeal because that person ended up in the White House. And so those of us who do believe in the benefits of free trade have a particular challenge, and that challenge is to make sure that free trade is inclusive. In our context, we have small medium enterprises that create over 450 million jobs in Africa, that contribute over 60% to Africa's GDP. So it is a significant sector of Africa's economy and employs a large number of young entrepreneurs. And so what we have been focused on in the last 2 years is to construct a trade agreement that is development in nature, that adequately responds to the challenge that was raised and that challenge of lack of inclusivity. We have taken the steps that are necessary for us to begin to respond to that challenge. The first step that we have taken is the protocol on women and youth in trade, the first of its kind around the world, where our heads of states, the Assembly of Heads of States and Government of the African Union, have directed us to develop a protocol that will ensure that as we implement the AfCFTA, nobody, particularly the very vulnerable segments of our society are not left behind. That is to say, small medium enterprises that are owned and run largely by women, mainly by women, and young entrepreneurs. And so through this protocol, we want to move beyond. We want to move beyond just expressing aspirations about gender equity and inclusivity in business and trade. We want to actually impose on ourselves legally binding obligations to make sure that this challenge of inclusivity in trade agreements, that we take the very first steps to address it. Last month, Her Excellency President Samia Hassan and I hosted the very first of its kind, a conference on women and youth in trade in Dar es Salaam, where we heard about the challenges, the experiences of young entrepreneurs, of small medium enterprises that are led by women, and also we heard solutions. And so we intend to table a report to our heads of states and government in November so that we are able to mobilize the highest political commitment on the continent to make sure that we address this question of inclusivity. Governments don't trade, as we all know. It is the private sector that trades. It's not people like me, trade diplomats. It's the private sector that trades. That is why it is so important that we engage directly with the private sector. We create platforms that will enable us to be aware of the challenges that the private sector experiences as you trade across regions and as you trade across borders on the African continent. One of them was mentioned, infrastructure, particularly trade supporting infrastructure. The African Development Bank, if you talk to our brother Adeshina, he will tell you that over the last 5 or 6 years, they have invested about $35 billion in infrastructure. Similarly, if you talk to Professor Orama from Afrexim Bank, he will say over the last 20 years, they have invested about $25 billion in trade supporting infrastructure. We know that the deficit, the infrastructure deficit in Africa is over $100 billion. But again, as was said by one of the panelists, this is an opportunity for investment. It's an opportunity for our private sector, our pension funds, private equity, to invest in Africa's infrastructure. Unfortunately, we as a trade secretariat, we don't have a mandate to mobilize resources for infrastructure development, although of course the underlying point that was made is clear, and that is that without adequate infrastructure, we will not be able to see the results and the benefits of the free trade area.